Hello everyone, welcome to CyberScoop TV. Greg Otto, your editor-in-chief here. We're coming to you from the floor of the 2019 Black Hat Conference. I'm talking with Dan Dahlberg, Director of Security for BitSight. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, BitSight just released some information recently about patching around BlueKeep. Talk about what you found.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so BitSight has been following the external exposure of BlueKeep now since basically the end of May.
Okay.
And there's a couple things that we actually want to be tracking. First of which is what the number of systems have been getting, how many systems have been basically getting patched over time, and more importantly, the industry response. And the biggest sort of findings that we've seen so far, and especially lately, is that while systems are continuously being patched right now, that rate is slowing down to some degree, right?
Okay.
And as well as the individual industry response. So we've seen some industries perform better than others in terms of actually being proactive and removing those systems, either mitigating them by taking them offline or actually patching them and still having them exposed. And a recent thing that we actually published was trying to get an idea of a little bit of the properties about some of these systems that are exposed, such as what operating system they're running, like servers versus workstations in various aspects. And another artifact that we observed from that is most of the systems that have been patched have actually been servers. Much of the workstations that were originally vulnerable still remain vulnerable, at least from what we are able to observe externally.
Okay, and why haven't they been patched? Is it just something that people are like, well, we'll take that risk, or what's the explanation for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably a very complicated situation for some of these organizations. There could be some organizations that may not even know that they have a system with RDP, and actually that remains unpatched. So it could be a systems management issue at some of these organizations. Others may have already identified it, but might believe that they sort of mitigate the risk around it, like just internally or something like that. But obviously, with that system still in place, it still can expose them. Others, it could just be an issue of the fact that they are, a lot of these devices, like BlueKeep, naturally affected older platforms. Right? And since it's kind of since it's a vulnerability that does affect these older systems, it's also higher likely chance that these systems are less organized more efficiently and managed more efficiently from that perspective.
So from the patching standpoint, what have you seen in terms of the way BlueKeep has changed the way organizations are patching? Because we recently did a story that looked at how a bunch of organizations reacted, and some had to take stuff online, some just pushed it out and kind of hoped for the best. And what are you seeing in terms of how this has changed the way companies are patching?
I think it's probably changed things in a couple ways. Probably the biggest shift in the way companies have been reacting to this specific vulnerability has been the effects that we've seen from Eternal Blue and WannaCry. So it's a vulnerability that people really like to make a reference to when it comes to BlueKeep because it shares similar aspects in terms of its potential damage. So that, I think, shaped at least a large part of probably organizations' internal responses and vulnerability management systems, and just to gain better visibility into what their ecosystem of machines are. What we've also observed when BlueKeep was first announced was that there was probably a much stronger initial messaging that came from not only Microsoft a couple of times, but other organizations, the NSA and things like that try to reinforce that necessity to kind of mitigate this issue. So I think those probably definitely had some benefit to organizations paying attention, right, and kind of geared them up and actually address these. But of course, there's still systems that are out there that are exposed externally and being vulnerable. One unfortunate aspect, again, and something I mentioned before in previous context, is that we still see systems being infected by Configure today. Configure is like 11, 12 years old, but there's still 500,000 systems out there that are still have Configure, and they're still being newly infected. So even though it's been around for a while, its exploits have been, of course, patched and remediated against, and best practices getting around some of the alternative attack vectors it uses, we still see systems out there, getting infected. So it's very sort of unfortunate that still exists, and maybe a while before we see all the BlueKeep instances be fully patched. But we definitely want to be monitoring that progress and see how the performance across various industries are.
So finally, Dan, when we come to Black Hat, we spend so much time talking about what end users should do. We very rarely get to actually get to a granular level and tell them what to do in terms of protecting themselves. How do you protect yourself on a day-to-day basis when it comes to cybersecurity?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I think it's being very aware. So a lot of end users, a lot of standard end users can't really, of course, benefit of a lot of the context that security practitioners have. Like a lot of the initial material around vulnerabilities, around security issues are typically very technical. It has to go through, a lot of message managing and things like that to actually describe the risks posed to each individual. And oftentimes, even though, we could be talking about an issue that says, hey, there's a chance, unrelated to BlueKeep, there's a chance your phone could get hacked and your data gets stolen, right? They may not realize the impact of that necessarily because it may not have happened to them. It's something they haven't personally experienced, really. A lot of users may get malware. They may not see the same devastating effects that companies might, right? Ransomware is actually a little bit of an exception because it's kind of like an in-your-face type, hey, I'm encrypting all your data and you're not getting it back until you pay me money. But things like ad fraud, click fraud, these things that kind of spam, that live under the surface and don't disrupt the user, that's less of a significant impact to them, so they could be less motivated to solve it. But as far as myself, I think just being aware of different security issues, kind of what are the best practices, of course, applying patches, ensuring devices are up to date, and various other artifacts do go a long way. And still the biggest risk to a lot of users aren't necessarily wild exploitation of vulnerabilities. There's, of course, a set of vulnerabilities out there that can be remotely exploited and do pose risk to them, but phishing is really still a big influence on users and how they can get susceptible to that. So of course, being aware when you're looking through email, really any other channel, one popular method of phishing, of course, now is sending SMS messages, pretending to asking for your two-factor code and various other things like that. So it's just being sort of aware of what those risks are. But we as an industry, I think we have to make sure that we come up with the correct messages and describe what those risks are and really the impact to those users in order to actually motivate them to follow these best practices.
Great. Dan, appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Thank you.
For all of our videos, check out our YouTube page. And for more on Black Hat and all things cybersecurity, check out cyberscoop.com. I'm Greg Otto. Thanks for watching.